tomorrow. The Americans made clear that they think that there's no realistic path to NATO membership for Ukraine. Prime Minister is saying that Ukraine is on an irreversible path to membership. We've parted company with the Americans, haven't we?
I'm not sure we have. So first of all, we all want the war to end, desperately want the war to end. I think it's clear for that to be a durable peace, Ukraine has to be at the table, has to be part of that agreement. We believe Ukraine is on an irreversible path to NATO membership. But the US Defence Secretary has said everything is still on the table. And I think the role the United Kingdom...
As far as the Americans are concerned, NATO membership is not on the table. Hegseth is clear about that. Trump is clear about that. They're not having it.
I'm not so sure. They said everything is still on the table as part of a peace settlement, which we all desperately want to see. And I think there is a role the United Kingdom can play, which is in that bridge between European allies and our US allies. We can be the bridge that strengthens that relationship. So it's an important role for us to play here as well. But we all want the war to end, but it's got to be a durable peace.
It would be lovely if we were this peacemaker, but the current White House doesn't feel like a place where there's a lot of compromise on offer. And at some point, we may have to choose. What happens when the Americans say no? And we've seen in the past year that one member of NATO can essentially cast a veto. Turkey vetoed Sweden. So the Americans may veto Ukraine. Where are we going to be on that?
Well, look, we have to accept there is a mandate for the new agenda of the new administration. They've successfully won the election. They've laid out very clearly how they feel about that. I think there are things as part of that agenda that most Europeans would recognise as having some validity. For instance, the fact that Europe itself is going to have to make a greater contribution to defence. The US is obviously going to be looking very much at the Pacific, wants to share some of the balance, some of the burden around that. So I think this is about how we, as Europeans collectively, and the UK's role in that, will respond to that agenda. But I think it's too early to start talking about divisions between allies. I really would push back very strongly on that. There's a set of things that we can talk about, we can engage in, whether it's the United Kingdom or other European countries.
OK, from what you've just said, actually, you seem to recognise another part of the Americans' mandate, which is that the president says Europe's got to now pay its way on defence. He's talking about a 5% rise, a 5% of GDP contribution. Now, at the moment, we're about 2.3%. And it will cost us the best part of 10 to 20 billion to get to even 3%. Now, are we going to do that? Will the Prime Minister overrule the Chancellor, who we understand doesn't really want to spend that kind of money?
No, again, I disagree. The whole cabinet, the whole government, I think most people in this country recognise the pressures the world is under, recognise more will have to be spent on defence. Now, the spending review will set out the roadmap towards that target. I would also point out...
the Chancellor's going to be cool with us getting towards that 3% or 4% or 5% or whatever it is.
The Chancellor knows more than most people the pressures on public services across the board, but defence has to be the cornerstone of our national prosperity as well as our security. Of course, there's a whole range of things the UK does. Our contribution to the intelligence services, for instance, should be considered, I think, as part of that contribution to collective Western security. But we only ever hit the 2.5%, remember, under Labour government. So this is something very much in the DNA of the Labour movement, something we take very, very seriously. I know the challenges are real, but the pressures on defence are real as well. So we'll set that roadmap out. I'd also say there's a lot more we need to do around defence industries in the UK.
I want to come to that, but just to be absolutely clear, so everybody understands the signal you're sending here, when we hear the spending review, you would expect there to be an increase in defence spending?
Well, we already had an increase, don't forget, of £3 billion in the last budget. We had the largest pay rise for the armed forces in 20 years in the last budget. So our credentials are there. We'll set out that roadmap in the spending review, as you do for all spending.
But you're not answering the question I'm
Well, I'm not you. You're trying to skillfully have me preempt the spending review, and you know I'm not going to
I know you're going to say that.
That is part of the process.
All I'm saying is everything you've just said to me implies pretty clearly that the United Cabinet, of which you have just spoken, expects there to be an increase in defence spending and expects the Chancellor, when she comes back to present her plans, they expect to see more money going into defence than there currently is.
Look, we will set out that roadmap. We have already put more money into defence in the first budget of this new government. So our credentials are there.
Right.
I understand the pressures are real, so are the defence pressures.
All right, well, look, one of the things that that comes out of this is the issue of whether we, as part of the European defence shield, NATO and so on, are really playing our part. And a critical part of that is the industrial base by which we produce weapons. Now, the Americans said to us 3-4 years ago, get on with it, start producing more weapons. What they seem to be saying now is, we're not doing that. Is it going to be part of your job as business secretary, industrial strategy and so on, to essentially revive the defence industries?
Oh, look, it is a crucial part of our industrial strategy. Defence is one of the 8 sectors of it. Of course, I work very closely with my friend, the Secretary of State for Defence, who has a major role in these matters as well. But there's a lot to be proud of in terms of the defence sector in the UK, but there is a lot more to do. If you look at our relative share of the European industrial base, I think there's a greater prize to be won. I think we should have more SMEs playing a bigger role. I've, for instance, made an intervention around making sure that ESG criteria don't prevent SMEs in the defence sector. They're getting the services that they need. So yes, this is going to be a focus of jobs and investment as well as the security side of the government.
That's quite interesting. I know that you said recently that perhaps we have too many regulators and so on. But am I to take it that what you think we ought to do, by the way, is look at some of the regulatory burdens on industries which come from ESG, environmental, social and governance requirements, that you want to take some of that off?
Well, first of all, I want the whole regulatory system to balance the different things we want from industry. So yes, we want consumer protection, we want safe, secure industries, economic activity, but I want growth, and I'm willing to shift that balance a little bit towards growth. I've been absolutely clear on that. Okay. On the ESG criteria, I think it's about misapplication. I think it's about not understanding the legitimate role, first of all, that defence has to play in our national life, economically as well as industrially. But also alongside that, I would say sometimes it's not a prohibition on defence, it's about understanding the risks of that industry. It's different in terms of the contracts you have, the relationship to geopolitical events. We can get that right and be consistent. But I'm absolutely key. Defence is a crucial part of our economy. We should be proud of it.
Can I just ask you very quickly a couple of things coming out of this Munich Security Conference? First of all, can you see British troops as part of a peacekeeping force?
Oh, we'd always say we'll play our part in a peace settlement. It's a little bit hypothetical at this stage, but of course it's in our national interest to make sure that's a durable peace.
All right. And the other thing which I wanted to ask about this is you must have listened to Vice President Vance's speech, and he talked about us failing to live up to our own values, freedom of speech. How did you react to that?
Well, I did say that we don't have to agree on everything, and I think that's one area where we would disagree. I speak as a Christian myself. No one is subject to any kind of enforcement from the state for praying in this country. The example he gave was about people being able to access healthcare, in this case abortions, free of intimidation or harassment. I think that's an important British value too. So I think we'd disagree in our interpretation of that issue.
And so your view is he's just wrong, he just doesn't get Britain?
I wouldn't put it in those terms. I think sometimes we've heard an argument there. Again, it was the agenda from the new administration. It was admirably clear, articulated, but we can disagree on some parts of that.
All right. Now, today you're announcing plans to boost our steel industry. Mr Trump has said he's going to drop a 25% tariff on steel imports to the United States with no exceptions. If he does that, what's your plan?
Well, look, first of all, we need to do some things in the UK to make sure our steel industry is as it should be. We've inherited quite a difficult situation. That's behind bringing forward those plans today with the publication of the Green Paper. On any issue of tariffs, particularly sensitive areas like steel and aluminium, we're going to engage with the new administration. If you look at what they say, Trevor, which is their grievance is the big trade deficits on goods that the US has. We do not have that between the US and the UK. We have one of the most balanced trading relationships of all. We appreciate what they have said on steel and aluminium, but it hasn't come into force yet, and we're using this time to engage with them. I don't want UK steel producers to have to pay this tariff, but I don't want our friends in the United States to have to pay more for goods and services from the UK. And that's what they would do if they put the tariffs on.
I can tell what you want, but it's what we actually do about it. So, first of all, when Mr. Sir Keir Starmer goes to Washington to meet President, is one of the things he's going to say to him is, please leave us out of the tariffs on steel. We're your friends.
Now, look, one thing he will say is we supply to the United States a series of products that are very specialised, very niche products. They include, for instance, important things for the US Navy as well as for American business and its own supply chain. There's no need for them to pay more for those things. These are products
So he's going to ask Trump to treat us as a special case?
Well, I'd say let's look at the interest of what the US as well as the UK needs in this area. But he'll also be willing to talk to the new US administration, as I have done already, about the kind of things where we could work more closely together, whether that's in technology, in services. There is the basis for that.
I know you're being diplomatic, but I'm reading that as he's going to say to Trump, why are you going to treat us like everybody else? We are your special friends. We provide something special. Make us an exception.
Well, look, if you look at the point about what they call reciprocal tariffs, so areas where the US is charging a lower tariff than the countries they're trading with, that doesn't really apply to the UK. We actually have lower tariffs on the whole than the US has itself. There'll be a couple of areas they'll want to talk about. But again, I say this is a balanced, mutually beneficial trading relationship. I don't want companies in the US to pay more for products they need from the United Kingdom. And look, I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but I think it's worth reacting in a way which says we respect your agenda, we will work with you and a mutual solution, mutual interest.
President Trump has said that he believes in an eye for an eye when it comes to trade. Is he just wrong in taking that point of view? Because for him, it's pretty straightforward. If you do that, if you charge us this, we'll charge you back.
Well, look, we are, as the United Kingdom, a much more globally orientated trading economy. You know, our exposure to global trade is greater, so our national interest lies in free, fair, open, transparent trade rules. I understand...
He doesn't think so.
I understand. Well, the United States has a different intensity to trade because it's a continental economy itself, but also at the same time, I understand there is a feeling in the United States that's driven a lot of political sentiment that they feel that they are the world's premier consumer market, but for instance, China is the world's biggest producer market. They feel that balance has worked unfairly for them. That is their agenda. We've got to respect it, but let's engage with it on their terms and get the best deal for the United Kingdom as part of that in our own national interest, working with friends and allies where we can.
All right, well, we'll see how you and the Prime Minister get on with the art of the deal. Let me just ask you about, if you like, vulgar politics. And I don't want to get into the he said, she said about this. But why doesn't the Chancellor just explain what took place about her employment rather than letting the story about whether her CV was right, whether she stayed at a particular bank for the time she did and so on? Why doesn't she just clear it up so we don't have this constant run of stories that's getting in the way, by the way, of talking about the things she really wants to talk about?
Well, I believe she has. I mean, first of all, we're talking about a LinkedIn page set up by a member of staff, and the issue is whether she worked at a place for 5.5 years or 6 years. Frankly, I think it's trivial. I think what matters is a Chancellor focused on the challenges this country has, putting investment in, delivering our plan for change. That's what you're judged on as a politician.
It's only one of the issues. There's a question about, was there an investigation into her expenses or not?
Can I just say on that, there's no evidence been put forward, and people who worked in HR at that company have said there was no investigation. So again, the job of the Chancellor, like myself, like all Cabinet colleagues, get on with the job, deliver the plan for change, the change the British public wanted. I think this is the kind of thing you just have to put up with in public life, but we are focused on delivering on the job.
So the basic message on the Chancellor is nothing to see here, move on. She will be Chancellor, really, when we come to the next election.
Well, the Chancellor is doing a job addressing some incredibly difficult challenges, turning around 14 years of incredibly disappointing economic performance. We won't deliver that overnight, but she's put in place the long-term investment, the competitive environment, the kind of changes working with me in the business department that will give businesses the platform to succeed. That's what we will be judged upon at the end of this Parliament when we look forward to the next election.
Jonathan Reynolds, thank you for your time this morning. Let's see what our panel made of all that.